Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction. The talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Dr. Fumene George Tsibani. We'll be discussing his new book, Nation Building Plan Between 2020 and 2064, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And just so you guys are aware, George was brought to People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business, UR Link Publishing. If you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through UR Link. You can find them at urlinkpublishing.com. And guys, I am so excited to have George here on the line with us because listen, the book that we're going to be discussing, Nation Building Plan Between 2020 and 2064. All right. So the title hits it right on the head, okay? There's no deciphering it. You know exactly what we're going to be going into. But the reason why this book is so pertinent and really so impressive is because how applicable it is to what we're currently going through. And listen, you know, we've talked about it. Seems like for an eternity now, and I think we still got a lot more to go, unfortunately. And we're all facing this pandemic globally. It's something that is affecting our communities all across the world. But this particular book that George has put together for us, it's really going to help because listen, at the end of this, guys, and even though it seems like it's a long road and we're not even close to the end, there will be a time where a vaccine is created and things start to normalize, right? But what is that future going to look like? Are we ever going to get back to quote unquote normal? I mean, really, what was that, right? And I guess based upon who you are and the community that you were in, your definition of what was normal varied. But what's amazing about what George has put together and comprised for us is really one of the underlying messages is it's all about social and economic cohesion. Okay, it's really about utilizing and celebrating the cultural differences, right? And constructing cultural centers to help benefit our communities. And that in and of itself is such a profound message. And listen, George is going to be able to explain this much better than I ever could, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's bring him here on the line with us. George, first and foremost, man, thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me and the privilege to meet you and the people in the world and in your station as well.
Absolutely. Well, listen, George, the pleasure is all ours, okay? We are definitely looking forward to this and really looking forward to picking up any advice and tips that you may be able to give us. So as if the temptation wasn't built up enough, let's hold off slightly. Let's not jump into the title just yet. Tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself.
My name is George Tsibani from the Republic of South Africa, known as Mandela Country. Born in a village in the Eastern Cape province and grew up in that province and studied at the University of Fort Hare, which is the oldest university in South Africa, and then also proceeded to University of Cape Town, University of Stellenbosch. I then worked for the Department of Water and Sanitation, as well as the Department of Health, and then proceeded to work with the Development Bank of Southern Africa. That's where I began to have an interest in looking at sustainable development linked to heritage as well as our social and economic cohesion. And then I began to focus on that as part and parcel of capacity building of various communities in South Africa, given our history of colonialism as well as apartheid, and trying to promote the notion of unity in diversity, and also ensuring at the same time that there is coexistence between what I call the human needs as well as the environmental needs. And this is inspired by the fact that when I read in history, I find that Africa is the cattle of humankind. And many of us, we differ in terms of features, but we have a common ancestry, which is around the African continent. And I believe that turning around African continent will have a huge impact in making us to survive various conditions that we are faced with, including your climate change and the natural disaster that we face, including the current sporadic cause of death by COVID-19. My view is that if we're to look at the nature and our needs, there is an opportunity for coexistence, and that is included in our paradigm, which is called Ubuntu paradigm. My book then said that we rather look at what I call restore pride through wealth creation. And that is the coexistence that I'm looking at. I think that's, in summary, that's my background.
You know, first and foremost, George, thank you so much. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. You know, one thing that you said that really stuck out. I mean, there was so many powerful things, of course, but you were talking about unity through diversity. I mean, what a concept. What an amazing concept. And really, when you think about it, you know, listen, it's a tale as old as time, right? When we're discussing it, it's one of those things that, yeah, we all know about, and we're taught when we're kids, you know, to celebrate our differences and, you know, come together that way. But of course, it's such a concept that always slips by our hands, right? It always slips through our fingers that way. And such an amazing concept. And really, now is the time, you know, going into this pandemic that we're all facing. And listen, it's a big road of adversity that we're all being challenged with right now. And I'm very close with my family. I always have been. And, you know, I often talk to my brothers about this. And listen, the pandemic, although it has given a lot of hardship to many people across the world, at the same time, I personally think it is opened doors, right? It's opened room for a lot of opportunities now, where it's kind of leveling a playing field and almost hitting a reset button on the way some things were orchestrated and developed. And that's feeding right into what you're talking about here in this book. And this is why I'm so excited to have you here to share. Now, as we go into it, I mean, you already started telling us about the book. First and foremost, man, listen, congratulations on your resume. You are quite the impressive specimen in the things that you've been able to accomplish and the degrees that you have. Very, very impressive in its own right. Talk to us about the inspiration behind this narrative. Okay, now you've started going into it, of course, with your experience and how that kind of pushed you forward, but really, of course, you don't come from a writing background, right? I mean, this is definitely something, yes, at least it seemed from doing the research in our conversations, this is a new route for you. Talk to us about your inspiration. Why were you inspired, and why did you feel compelled to write this narrative?
What has inspired me, I want to say firstly that this was a collective effort between myself and our publisher, ULink Print Media, and I would like to say thank you very much for their efforts of putting this together. What has inspired me mostly was our former president Nelson Mandela, when he was in Robben Island and came out and showed a sense of history, a sense of belonging, a sense of valuing the culture and the identity, and the value for justice. Mm-hmm. And is very important because it created to me to say the space and the landscapes that we're in provide us with an opportunity to learn from them. So I learn a lot from the environment, but funny enough, well, I'm a sociologist. So based on that, it was for me to look and say, what is my contribution in terms of then taking forward what Madiba have left for us, which is the unity in diversity. And one of those was to look at saying, one area that I must look at is how to look at wealth creation. And through wealth creation, and link that wealth creation to smart cities. And taking the smart cities and provide what I called restoration of pride. Now, what is this wealth creation all about? For me, as a South African and part of Africa, is to look at water as a natural resource and link it to energy in terms of efficiency, and look at agriculture in terms of food production, and looking at land in terms of restoring the wealth that we have in terms of minerals and resources, and link that to technology in terms of advance and responding to climate change, as well as also coming out with engineering solutions to all the complexities, including climate change and the need for urban reliance in terms of development. And also looking at health in terms of, because this is a component that we're faced with now, is that we have in the past limited ourselves in terms of health. And that is the reason why I thought that, for me, I always put this as a nexus, looking at water, energy, agriculture, land, and technology and health. And this can lead to what I called smart cities. And smart cities means looking at a set of scientific solutions to deal with the environment, to deal with our demands, and deal with the needs of communities as well as the countries. And then that is the S part of smart. And making a rich difference in terms of persuading the global community to agree to work together in terms of addressing environmental issues. And then your A is the ability to absorb various problems and challenges. And then the R will mean also looking at where there are disasters, can we have the ability to rehabilitate them? That's the R part. And then looking at transportation. If you look at Africa, Africa is underdeveloped at the moment. We need a lot of transportation, which will open out what I called free trade agreement in Africa and between the 54 countries. And then very important for me, that becomes the smart part of it. And then for this to happen, I believe that we need to be having what I call pride. As a sociologist, we use the word pride to mean the need for production, the need for reindustrialization, because all wealthy countries have reindustrialized before. In as much we need to have a green solution to that industrialization that we're talking about. And then we need to be innovative, because we need now, in the current situation, we don't just need entrepreneurs. We need people that I called ideapreneurs. Ideapreneurs is people that will bring up solution and intellectual property to those solutions. And then the D means a need for each country to have what I called a fitting in terms of domestication and also enterprise development. So the concept I'm using in this book are very simple. It says, let's build smart cities through wealth creation by restoring pride. Now, when you look at it from political point of view, it might seem to say pride, but it talks about production, reindustrialization, innovation, domestication of services in terms of manufacturing, and then enterprise development. In my view, we can beat the post-COVID-19 scenario if we were to utilize those. And I think, to me, this is well documented in the African Agenda 2063. And what have hit most of the African states is that they focus on 3-year plan instead of a long plan. If you look at China and other Asian tigers, they look at 100-year plan. And that's the agenda that I'm trying for us to be more focusing on in Africa in particular. And that this can be done in collaboration, of course, because we're talking about 21st century information age, in collaboration with international development agencies, development bank, and various entities that can assist in terms of sustainable development. I think, to me, that's the nutshell of this book. This book also says, for us to do that, you must look at the fit. The feet has 5 fingers. And those 5 fingers, the first one is for policy. We need to make sure that our policies are credible, our policies are sustainable. We need to have a planning system that starts with the water, energy, agricultural development, in particular in Africa. We need to have sustainable services, and we need to have financing mechanisms that are in place. For me, in South Africa in particular, I've been telling government, there's no way you can work without the private sector. Let's have a core funding models that is built around what I called build, operate, train, and transfer. And then the last important one is to evaluate what we have. Now, if you look at those are the 5 fingers. First finger is policy, the second one is planning, the third one is services, the fourth one is finance, and the fifth one is evaluation. In my view, combined with smart city, wealth creation, and restoration of pride, we can make a change. We can make a new world, a world and a new deal that will be actually addressing our human needs and balancing such human needs with the environmental needs. I think that's what I think in a nutshell this book is all about.
Well, George, listen, man, I think you're onto something, okay? This is absolutely incredible stuff that you're bringing up. Taking a quick pause, once again, here on the line with Dr. Fumene George Tsibani. We're discussing his book, Nation Building Plan Between 2020 and 2064, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. George, I mean, this is absolutely incredible. And listen, the things that you're talking about, what's so incredible about it is how specific and detailed this all is. I mean, this is clearly not something you've just, said on a whim or wanted to be really general about concepts. I mean, this is something you've clearly have taken the time to really go in through and plan. And as and listen, as the date says, from 2020 to 2064, okay, there's 44 years there that you've planned out for in terms of building a nation, right? Or building multiple nations. Guys, get out there, pick up this book. This is something that we all, listen, if we're all on board with, if this is something that we can all get together with and formulate a plan to really not even formulate a plan, the plan's already been formulated, utilize the plan that's been established, it is remarkable in the way our world will be able to be altered and changed that way. George, this is incredible, man. Listen, the next question that I have to go into is really a personal curiosity to myself, being a person of color, being from a community of color. You're laying out these plans and all of it makes so much sense. Now, I remember doing the research on you. I came across a quote that said, Dr. Tsibani argues that our heritage and culture can add more value to creative cities and industries. And I know you've already gone into the importance, as we stated with the very first quote that really stuck in my mind was the unity through diversity. How can communities of color use this book to tap into those means?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. For me, for instance, I work through this report. I work with traditional leaders. I work with underprivileged communities. I do part of my life is to train unemployed youth in the country. And I find that is, as an outside government, by the way, I find that quite inspiring because you face real challenges on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And what have worked for me is that I look at Eastern Cape as a province, for instance. Most of the towns in the Eastern Cape were not planned as you would plan New York or California and so forth. Those towns were forts. In other words, they were built on the basis of military warfare between the indigenous people of South Africa. The network is gone. The indigenous people of South Africa and the colonialists. Now, we look at those and say, guys, the past is the past, and we can learn from the past. We are at the present. Now, these towns are forts. How do we utilize them as part of our heritage, as part of global heritage, as part of resources to be utilized in terms of tourism attraction to South Africa. For instance, if you take Eastern Cape, you have what I call the English towns, which are coastal towns. And then you have the inner part of it, which is the German towns, like your Portstead, Berlin, Stutterheim. Then you have the inner land of which is more Afrikaans, Dutch, German as well. And the combination of all of this brings us to one thing. How do we generate value out of what we have and utilize that to build up what I call sustainable community development models? Sustainable community development models are based on the issue of sense of history, sense of identity, sense of culture, sense of belonging, and sense of justice where there is work and contribution. As I'm talking to you, we're sitting at 65% unemployment in South Africa. And there are opportunities, but people are not utilizing those opportunities. Hence this concept of restoring pride through wealth creation, through smart cities, through innovation, and intervention that can make a maximum impact. And I think that, to me, is what we're looking at. And I think that there's no lack of opportunities if people can understand the concept itself. For instance, if you talk about between now and 2030, we do know that there will be a shortage of 30% food shortage in the country. And why we need to look at that, we need to work on what I called water and energy and food production initiatives. And that, to me, is what this book is all about. And in terms of looking at the chapters themselves, in each chapter, you have a phrase that takes you through a planning process. And that planning process says the first component is to look at what infrastructure is required. The second component is to look at what can be cultivated and how these can be utilized to include what I call social and economic cohesion. And then the third component will be the actual modeling of the infrastructure using technology. And the fourth component is about knowledge and management systems. That needs to be a part of this. This will create what I called information age system and reporting. We're not going to utilize the old methods nowadays. We are at the fourth industrial revolution. And the last part of it, the plan itself, how this roadmap can be utilized to mentor young, innovative engineers and professionals, so that you have what I called an intersection between the old generation and the younger generation. That, to me, is what this book is also presenting to a reader.
You know, George, listen, man, you need to write some more books. Okay. You have so many amazing concepts and so many amazing ideas. Do us all a favor, please write more books, because this is something that needs to be put out to the masses. Okay. And following off of that concept of writing more books, really, listen, how else do we tie up this interview any other way? The only other question that I have left that I could possibly ask you is, what is next for you, George?
After writing this book, one of the team members from Uprint asked me what is next. Exactly the same question. What I've done was to spend part of my budget, but I never thought that there was going to be COVID-19, and do what I call socio-economic analysis of each and every municipality in South Africa, which is called a water service authority. And I then employ about 8,000 unemployed youth and train them to be field workers, and employ 450 unemployed graduates for them to be supervising. And I've compiled a report of 72,600 households in each province. And I'm writing that report now. It is about 645 pages. And of course, it's going to be a tool on how countries in Africa with its underdevelopment can utilize a tool called socio-economic development so that it becomes a prerequisite for infrastructure investment, particularly with European Union. I'm currently talking to various international development agents as well as the development finance institution like your Development Bank of South Africa and the African Bank to look at the report that I've written about. It means that through this COVID-19, I've seen that we need in Africa, in particular South Africa as well, to restructure institutions to be geared towards making nexus between water, energy, agriculture, and technology so that we can deliver fast and appropriately so, and also create what I call capable, accountable, and responsiveness in terms of our institutions. And that's the challenge that I'm going to have. So using that socio-economic start, interviewing ordinary people that are households in various municipalities, which is 144 municipalities in all the 9 provinces in South Africa. That to me is going to build up what I called the next book, which is your socio-economic models and how this can be utilized to deliver sustainable development. I think that's the next challenge that I have.
You know, George, listen, man, I started off the interview by talking about how impressive your resume was. Just listening to everything you say, guys, do yourself a favor, okay? I'm not even going to go into it anymore. Enough has been said. George has completely laid everything out for us. All you have to do is head over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, pick up your copy of Nation Building Plan Between 2020 and 2064 by Dr. Fumene George Tsibani. George, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for really enlightening myself, enlightening our audience, and listen, you are, as I've stated, a very, very impressive individual, and we see that just from listening to you talk, the stuff that you talk about in this book is applicable, it's warranted, and it's needed. So thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. We truly appreciated it.
Thank you very much on my team, including the U-Link, print and media, and yourself for giving me this opportunity. It was excellent. And thank you very much to your listeners. And I'm looking forward to be partners with others as well, because this is quite a huge task. We need to create a state of equilibrium in our lifetime. And I think that's the few words that I can say. Thank you very much.